Good morning, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
Today, we're touching on a subject it opens up almost indirectly. On reading a certain passage, it took me to a field that is very close to our hearts, and that's the Enneagram. And it started a train of thought that when you look at the encounter experiences of Jesus, it is often a case of he looks at a person's personal life. There's been a crisis or something opened up. I've read the other day, somebody said he would write the book about Jesus's ministry, and that would be the ministry of interruptions, because often Jesus is interrupted. And then he stops, and there's this conversation, there are these encounters, but they are, for the most part, chanced encounters.
Yeah.
It wasn't constructed or whatever, it opened up.
Yeah. And I think in terms of Jesus, what he would then probably say is what's in the way is the way.
Yes.
And he gave his time and he gave his energy every single time.
Yeah. But reading this particular passage about Zacchaeus, it tied in so beautifully with the Enneagram. And the more you read the Gospels and the Bible in general, Paul's letters and so on, the Enneagram provides a key to understand that language. Because we tend to take the gospel message, the words of Jesus, the words of Paul, and we make it a very complicated theological construct. A certain language, which makes it almost separate from daily living and daily life. It is as if you step out of daily living into a different sphere where different rules apply and so on, and it's almost once removed from daily living.
So it's something you do, not something you live.
Yes. And if you
Something
do it,
you practice.
and if you do it right, you feel better about yourself, because then you follow the instructions that Jesus and Paul, that the Bible gives. But the encounters and the message of Jesus in general is about getting in touch with ourselves. It's not a foreign message. It is a message of, I want you to get really in touch with you, to be free from ego constructs. The things that you erect and build and accumulate to make you feel safe, to make you feel worthy, to make you feel important. All of that, he wants us to get in touch with that, to be free from those ego constructs, because when we get to know ourselves, we get to know God. It is this wonderful, can you say a paradox?
I think so. It's almost as if the ego becomes like a certain radio wave that interferes with the essence, with the true self, with your God self, in trying to communicate with God directly. So the ego becomes this barrier almost, so that you cannot actually, or you feel you can't reach God, or even reach yourself. The ego just creates this wall, which you believe to be yourself.
Because you over-identify
Yeah.
with the ego construct.
Yeah.
And Jesus' message is about us being freed from ego constructs.
In order to be in a relationship with God, a more intimate relationship with God.
Yes.
And which is what he came to show,
And loved.
which he lived.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in that sense, he lived it. And saying, this is what a full life is. Conveying that message. So the passage that I want to read is, as I said, it's here in Luke 19, this meeting of Jesus, the encounter of Jesus and Zacchaeus. And I read here from verse 1. Then Jesus entered and walked through Jericho. There was a man there, his name Zacchaeus, the head tax man and quite rich. So in terms of generally ego constructs, Zacchaeus achieved a lot. He was important. He was the head tax man. So he oversaw a group of tax collectors of a region. So he was a branch manager or a regional manager actually. And he was quite rich.
So he had stature.
Yes.
I think he had a lot of enemies as well.
Yeah.
But he would be, in social circles, he would be somebody to reckon with.
Yes, yes. People took note of Zacchaeus. Even despite his lack of length, he was a man to be reckoned with. And when the ego comes into play, the ego will say, well, if I achieve this and it brings me security, even if I make enemies, that's part of the game. But at least I have security for myself.
Yeah.
Very self-centered in that sense. He wanted desperately to see Jesus, but the crowd was in his way. He was a short man and couldn't see over the crowd. And often when I read this, and I think in the current situation, our social situation, because it often happens that way, if Zacchaeus' mother in the retirement home in Jerusalem, if her friends were to ask her, so your son, Zacchaeus, how is he doing? She would say, very, very well. He's doing well for himself. He's a man of stature and quite rich. So in terms of that, he was an important man. And then it's interesting that he is so driven to see Jesus.
Yes, I mean, he desperately wanted to see Jesus.
And you ask yourself, this man that has everything,
Yeah.
why did he want to see Jesus?
Yeah.
Which tells you he had everything, but there was a big void. He wanted more. And for some reason, it didn't lay on the level of accumulation of monetary goods.
Yeah.
But
it might even be that he was hearing people talk about Jesus, him telling about love and about an abundant life, and these things were not making sense in terms of this person walking bare, well, with sandals in the dirt, dusty sandals, not not at all somebody with wealth or possessions.
No, not at all.
And having this message and this, maybe in terms of his 5 energy, it could be that he was just really also curious. Something was calling him.
Yeah, because when you read this passage, Matilda touches on the 5 energy. When you read this passage and you take the Enneagram as a key that can help to understand this passage,
And his behavior.
And the way Jesus reacts to him, and Jesus's behavior, then the 5 on the Enneagram plays in beautifully, and it helps to understand this situation very well. So Zacchaeus wanted desperately to see Jesus, but he couldn't see over the crowd. So he ran on ahead and climbed up in a sycamore tree so he could see Jesus when he came by. In our context, with his fancy suit, he climbed that tree. Put his cell phone in his back pocket and up he goes.
Also hiding a little bit, maybe.
I think so, but giving new meaning to the term branch manager. So he could see Jesus when he came by. When Jesus got to the tree, he looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, hurry down. Today is my day to be a guest in your home." Zacchaeus scrambled out of the tree, hardly believing his good luck, delighted to take Jesus home with him. Everyone who saw the incident was indignant and grumped. What business does he have getting cozy with this crook? Zacchaeus just stood there, a little stunned. He stammered apologetically, "Master, I give away half my income to the poor, and if I'm caught cheating, I pay 4 times the damages." Jesus said, "Today is salvation day in this home. Here he is, Zacchaeus, son of Abram. For the Son of Man came to find and restore the lost." So if you look, you use the Enneagram, this wonderful tool about the inner journey, because that is the gospel message. It is about the inner journey. When we go to our deepest sense or deepest self, we meet God. The two are interrelated. And the Enneagram helps us with understanding the gospel message. So Zacchaeus is a 5. The 5 on the Enneagram is the investigator. He wants to look at things at a distance. He doesn't want to get involved, just to observe. And the 5 is a hoarder. Whether it's information, not necessarily money, but sometimes it can be money. Because anxiety plays a role with 5s as one of the head types. So Zacchaeus is a hoarder to alleviate his anxiety about his old age and compensating for his posture and getting stature in that sense. So everything plays out beautifully here. He observes this big hoarder of money. And then Jesus does 2 things that brings the 5 to his essence. He crosses 2 borders. He says, "Zacchaeus, you can't be just an observer. There's this close contact." And where the 5 hates intrusion, Jesus says, "I'm coming into your home." So he says, "Zacchaeus, this isn't working for you anymore. There must be closer contact." And when he does that, it opens up in Zacchaeus. And he says, "I'm not clinging to the things that I hoard. I realize that isn't giving me the safety I'm looking for. I'm giving it away. Instead of living with a sense of scarcity, I'm living out of abundance. So I'm giving away.
And repaying.
And repaying. So it's this getting in touch with the essence of Zacchaeus.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And then Jesus says, for the Son of Man came to find and restore the lost. When we only live out of ego, we are lost. We can achieve as much as we want to and so on, as Zacchaeus did, but if we're really honest, there will be a void.
Yeah, and he's lost to himself.
Yes.
And probably to his family.
Yes.
And to his community.
Yes. Yes.
And to God.
Yeah.
In the sense of not being in connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way Jesus reacts towards a 5 on the Enneagram, it's beautiful when you read it here. And you can go even deeper.
Yeah.
But just skimming the surface, this is a beautiful passage.
Very lovely. I'm sure it speaks to you in terms of you coming from 5.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And it's just a combination of 2 wonderful topics, and that is the Bible, and especially the encounters, encountering experiences that we read about in the Gospel where Jesus meets people. But also the Enneagram, and how the Enneagram helps me to understand the heart of God. Thank you. Lovely to share this with you, and we'll talk again next week.
Goodbye, everybody.